Welcome to the Educational Leadership Podcast, the podcast where education meets innovation and leaders like you transform schools into thriving communities. Join us as we guide you through the ever-evolving world of educational leadership, from strategies that inspire your staff to insights that shape your students' futures. We're here to sharpen your skills, amplify your talents, and ignite your impact. So grab your coffee, a notebook, and most importantly, your growth mindset as we embark on a journey to redefine what it means to lead with purpose and passion. This isn't just a podcast. It's professional development. Let's build better schools together, one episode at a time. Now, here's your host, Principal JL. Today, I'm excited to have Todd Bloomer on the podcast. For nearly 3 decades, Todd has served students, teachers, and communities as a teacher, coach, assistant principal, middle school principal, and high school principal in the Houston and San Antonio, Texas areas. Todd is a New Yorker that fell in love with Texas and its culture. He shares with us his journey in education and some golden nuggets he learned along the way. Todd has currently just retired from public education and is transitioning into a new role as the Director of School Leadership for the Archdiocese of San Antonio. Todd is also an author of the book, The Blueprint, Survive and Thrive as a School Administrator. Now let's get to the conversation with Todd Bloomer. Welcome to the Educational Leadership Podcast show. Today, I have in the house Todd Bloomer. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. It's an honor to be here.
All right, Todd, I'm going to start you off with the same question I ask everybody. What inspired you to become an educator?
You know, Jeff, both my parents were educators. My father was a high school teacher and a coach, and my mother was an elementary school teacher and a coach. And so I like to tell people I entered the family profession. Early on in my life, I had 2 goals. I was either going to be the shortstop for the New York Yankees, and Derek Jeter blocked me for 20 years of doing that, or I was going to be the 4th member of the great musical group, the Beastie Boys. And since I had no musical talent, that didn't work out at all either. And so I like to jokingly tell people that as I progressed through my schooling and becoming a teacher and a coach and assistant principal, I landed my dream job as a high school principal here in San Antonio, Texas.
All right. So you went from New York to San Antonio, Texas. Tell us about that journey. What got you clear to Texas?
Yeah, you know what? It's a great story. I graduated from college, and New York was kind of in a hiring freeze. And I've always been one that's up for an adventure. You know, I'm that guy that you can call and let's go. I'm ready. And I applied for jobs all over the country. And in a great sports way, I only applied to jobs in cities that had all 3 major sporting teams: football, basketball, baseball. And so one of those was Houston, Texas. And Jeff, I'd never been to Texas. I'd never been to Houston. I knew nothing about it. And I remember getting a phone call one morning. I was living in my parents' basement. I was doing some substitute teaching and hating it. I hated waking up in the morning to figure out if I was going to work. And I was like, And so I need a job. And so got offered a job in Houston, Texas, just outside of Houston, and accepted. And I thought, I'd go for 1 year, and went down, loved it, loved the people, loved the culture, loved the food. I got to be a teacher and a coach, got to experience Friday Night Lights. After year 1, I decided to go back for year 2. And then in year 2, I met my wonderful wife, Sharon, and we got married and had family. And the rest is history. And I'm a Texan. I've now been in Texas longer than I was a New Yorker. I still consider myself a New Yorker, but I love San Antonio, Texas with all my heart.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's really neat to just kind of hear that story about going from New York and going to Texas and kind of what gets people there. That's really great to hear. Now, let's talk about teaching, right? You got this job, you're in Houston. What about teaching did you learn to help you become the leader you became? What was it about teaching and coaching that kind of got you going? And what are some lessons you learned as your time as a teacher and coach that did prepare you for that next step in leadership?
Relationships. At 22 years old, I was a teacher and a coach. And some of those kids that I taught my first year, I'm friends with on Facebook, and they're in their 40s now, and like, I'm like, holy cow, I'm not a young pup myself, but holy cow. And so building those relationships with those kids and really being on my own, like being 1,800 miles from home. I packed up a Geo Prism with a TV in the back and every clothing item I owned and moved to Texas. So really having to force to grow up on my own and really, be able to carry myself well. And I'll tell a story that is really relevant to just my leadership journey, because as funny as this sounds, my first year in Texas, I taught Texas history. It's a seventh grade class that was a social studies class. And Jeff, I knew nothing about Texas. I knew the Alamo and, I knew the TV show Dallas and, the Cowboys and the Spurs and that's about it. Right. And so, I'm teaching Texas history, and I vividly remember my first year, we're teaching a unit about the amount of rainfall in El Paso, Texas. And I've still never been to El Paso, Texas, and I have a good friend that lived there and I worked with from El Paso, beautiful city. And this kid raises his hand and with all honesty and says, the hell do I care how much rainfall El Paso gets? I'm never going to leave Houston. And not a disrespectful way, but just in a matter of fact way. And it really made me consider right there on the spot that if I'm just trying to regurgitate information from a textbook, I'm going to be back in New York by Christmas because this is going to fail. And so really I had to connect with kids. I had to empower kids. I had to seek a voice from kids to be able to say, what's the best way to learn? How do you learn? Like, do you want to work on a project instead of this? Like, how can we do this? Can we do a talk show instead of a report? And really, honestly, in 1996, I started dabbling in some really cool ways to bring instruction to life that were just outside of the box, that were just not the norm of what I was taught in college for instructional practices. Because if I didn't, my kids would have hated it. Now I had a good classroom management and good rapport, so kids would have done what I needed them to do, but they wouldn't have gained anything out of it. And through that interaction and through that getting to know and through that really checking on kids and then really differentiating and seeing, it allowed kids that might not have enjoyed history or Texas history to really come alive because they got the experience in a different way. It wasn't a worksheet, test on Friday. It was let's stand up and let's act things out. Let's stand up and be unique in what we're doing. And so, that really, drove me. And so to take that into the assistant principal and the principal role, the school is as much the kids as it is ours, and students have a voice. And oftentimes, we ask teachers about voice in a school, and we ask parents about voice, but we don't ask kids. But I did, and I do. And it's important that I have the pulse of the campus. Now, if the kids came to me, Jeff, and said, we want an open campus and want to leave to go during lunch, well, I can't allow that. That's a district policy that we can't have. But I can listen. And it's important that there's a differentiation because it's important for voice and vote. Just because students want something doesn't mean they automatically get something. And so really from that lesson where that kid raised his hand and said he don't care about rainfall in El Paso, it taught me that I have to listen to my stakeholders. I have to listen. And there are times where their voice is relevant and it matters, and their opinion is just as important as opinions of anybody within there. And sometimes we have to change because of what our clientele or our students dictate to us. And so really back in 1996, in the fall of 96, teaching about the limited number of rainfall in Texas, took me 29 years to really seek voice. And within my book, I talk a little bit about the Bloomer triangle of success. And it's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to put it. But if you can picture a triangle, and a triangle is, the strongest shape in geometry, and on each point of the triangle, it's got three parts that need you to be able to solicit voice from: teachers, parents, and students. And so really from that lesson, I think that from that day in class really took me to be the leader that I am today.
Awesome, man. Just that one interaction, just that one thing kind of just sets your course. That's really great and awesome to hear. Now let's talk about that next step. Okay. You kind of have that experience in the classroom, and then it was like, hey, I'm going to move into the assistant principal role. And so let's talk about what was it that had you go classroom teacher, coach into assistant principal. What was that? What was that story? What's the story behind that? What inspired that?
I worked with a coach at my middle school when I moved from Houston to San Antonio, and he was going through and doing his master's after practice. And he'd come back. Eric Wernley's the principal in San Antonio. He'd come back and the coach's lounge and the coach's office, we'd talk sports, and then he'd talk about what he was learning in his classes, and it really inspired me. And I convinced a friend of mine, Hector Perales, who was a coach and a teacher with me at the middle school, to go back. And really, it was surrounding yourself with just great people. And like I always felt like I had a command and a presence that I could be an effective leader. I started volunteering to work on my off period with assistant principal on the campus, and really enjoyed the day-to-day, the investigations, the referrals that they gave me, working with parents, trying to problem solve, working with kids, working with teachers. And it really inspired me. And that little bit of taste of what an assistant principal was like, one period a day, really fueled me to want to go back and get my master's. And, if anybody's out there listening and thinking about it, drag along a friend. Like, honestly, we went, there was 4 of us that drove about 60 miles, really before, online was vogue. And we drove about 60 miles, and we went every other Saturday, and then we went all through the month of June. And like the 4 of us together, misery loved company. And so we were able to band together to be able to do that. And so really, inspired by a good buddy of mine who's a heck of a principal and a good friend, and then brought along a couple others. And I'm happy to say that Hector Perales, who I dragged along reluctantly, I hired him to be an assistant principal at the high school that I was at. And so, really good stuff. And so really just inspired by people like, and Nick Saban says it, surround yourself with winners or sit with winners. The conversation's different. And when you get around people that really want to change the world, for lack of better terms or ideas, like that's what I was in. I was in those circles of people all of a sudden that were like, hey, we don't have to accept this, and let's make change, and let's stop talking about it. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's really important, to surround yourself with people that are like-minded, where, hey, we want to change things. We want to do things differently because what's currently working is not working. So there's got to be a better way to do things. And I think that's really important to people that are out there that are in the principalships or looking to become a principal down the road, is surround yourself around good people, around people that have been there, done that, but have been successful doing it.
Absolutely.
Because you're going to learn from that. And I think that's really important to kind of bring out. So what are some lessons you learned as an assistant principal that helped you when you took that principalship down the road?
Problem solving, number one. Problem solving, time management, going back again to soliciting voice and listening, and then working with adults. The problem solving is the best. And as a former coach, we're problem solving all the time. You call a play and it doesn't work. You got to figure something out, and you got like 30 seconds to do it. And, you can't just practice it during the game. You have to have preparation leading up to it. And so the planning for it. And so, I would make a calendar each day. I'd arrive before the sun came up as assistant principal, and I'd get my stuff done because I truly believed, people before paper. And one of the things that I learned, just being a coach and a teacher, transitioning to an assistant principal and then to a principal, was I didn't want to be in an office. Like, I enjoyed people. And you can get trapped in an office and play assistant principal, play principal all day long. And you can do it. There's lots of things to do. You got reports and emails and calls and meetings and yada, yada, yada. You name it. You got stuff to do. But you know what? You can't run a school from an office. You have to be visible, and you have to be out there interacting with people. And you have to set the tone. And if you expect teachers to interact with kids and the principal, by golly, you better be leading the example and interacting with every kid that went by and saying hi to every teacher that went by. And so really time management, really problem solving, and really just being out with people. And then lastly, the thing that I think separated me from a lot of other assistant principals and then into the principalship, I love my job, and I had great joy in my job wherever I went. And I loved lunch duty. I love talking to kids about fantasy football during lunch duty. I love passing period duty. I love finding the the quarterback of the football team, the drum major, the cheerleader captain. I love talking to the kid that, I saw working at McDonald's and just acknowledging them and making sure that they felt recognized and supported. And I did that as an assistant principal, and I transitioned that into the principal role.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
Awesome. So what was it that inspired you to go from assistant principal into principalship?
I'd been an assistant principal 7 years. I'd been an assistant principal both the middle school and the high school. And I fell in love with the high school. Like, honestly, I just fell in love with the pace, the energy, the older age of the students, the extracurricular. And I always knew I wanted to be a high school principal. In our district, the one that I just retired. So in the district I just retired from, really the path was become a middle school principal and then become a high school principal. That was the blueprint to success that they had. It was a very good blueprint. Like before you can run a school of 2,500, let's see if you can run a school of 750 or 1,200. And so I was given an opportunity to go. I was blessed. I applied for a lot of principalships that I didn't get, never gave up. I always sought feedback from how I could do better. Always self-analyzed and thought, okay, it's not my turn. And sometime, my turn will come up. I landed a principalship at a wonderful middle school, a secret gem, about 1,200 kids. Loved it. Could have stayed there forever. I could have retired from there. But, Jeff, we're leaders. We're competitive people. We're coaches by nature, and we always want to try something, and we always want to leave something a little better. And we found it. And I had reached 4.5 years as a middle school principal, and I felt it was time. And the neighborhood school that I live in, that all 5 of my children went to, that high school opened up. And I was the assistant principal there for 4.5 years, 4 years before I became a middle school principal. I lived a mile down the road. The church that I went to was the same church the kids went to. The grocery store was their grocery store. The park I ran in, I saw kids. My neighbors were my kids. And I thought, this is a community I love, and I wanted to make a difference. And what better way to make a difference in a community is then serve your community. And so I applied. And in 2019, I was named principal of Winston Churchill High School in San Antonio, Texas. And I had reached the epitome of my career. And really, honestly, Jeff, I just left the profession about a month ago, and I still have gas in the tank. And honestly speaking, I left where I felt on a high. Like, I'd hired all my assistant principals, all my counselors but one. I had football coach, my band director, numerous positions. I loved the staff. I loved going to work. Teacher satisfaction was off the charts. Students' involvement was off the charts. Academically, we're progressing in all the right spots. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I'll ever be able to have this kind of year again. And I decided it's time to step away. Like, I'm going to hand the school off to another wonderful assistant principal who's going to take it to places I couldn't take it to. But I loved 24, 25 as a principal. Like, when I look back, that was my quote unquote favorite year as a principal. And so, why do you leave? Well, I left. And sadly, we have a narrative in our profession of people leaving because of burnout and being forced to leave. I didn't leave because of that. I left when I still loved my job. Like, I'd get up and go to work with a beat in my step, and my wife would say to me, "What time are you coming home?" And I'd be like, 10 o'clock tonight. Like, and while, that wears on a man after a while, like, it didn't bother me. Like, wherever I was, I loved my job. If I'm at a band concert on Tuesday, man, I loved it. If I was at a musical or a play on a Wednesday, that was my Broadway. Like, and I brought my wife along. I brought my father was along for the journey, and all my children were there. And so, I kind of summarized the question right there, but, I jumped in because, like, it was an opportunity to serve the community. And honestly, little known fact about me, I have a couple tattoos, and I even debated at one point getting a tattoo with the high school on it, but I chickened out and didn't, but I loved the community that I served. And that's why I jumped to be a high school principal. And I feel like it's important to tell people why I left. Also, I left because I still loved my job, and I would hate Jeff, one morning to wake up, my wife say, what time are you going to be home? And then me to complain about it, or me not to want to go to that band concert or that choir concert or that, cross country meet at 7:30 on a Saturday after I worked a Friday night football game till 10:30 at night. And I've worked 3 Saturdays this month. Like, I owe it to kids and parents to be all in. And if you're a high school principal out there, and I'll just speak to high school principals out there, the only way you can do it is all in. The late great Mac Miller said, you can't swim unless you jump in, and it's the only way to do the job. And I have not a full tank, Jeff. I got about 2/3 of a tank of gas, but I worried that next February that could be getting close to E, and my campus deserves the best, and that's why I stepped away.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's really important. I know, like, in my journey, my personal journey, if I ever get to the point to where I don't like what I do or I don't love what I'm doing, that's my cue to say, time to step away. But I absolutely love what I'm doing. I'm a high school principal as well. I've been in, small rural schools. I've been in the metro in Omaha. I've been up, all different sizes of schools, and high school is kind of like where my niche is. Like, I knew high school is where I wanted to be, and that's where I'm at. And I love what I do. And, I'll be going into my 4th year at the current principalship that I'm at right now. Now, we all know, like, running larger school buildings and schools in general, it's time consuming. There's a lot going on, but how do you build a strong culture? How do you build that team? You kind of talked about, hey, I got this school from this point to the point to where, it's in a great place. And I know the next person is going to be able to come in and take it even to greater things. So how did you build that? What was it like when you got into the role? And then how did you build that up to this past year to where you guys were humming and just going on also?
Yeah. Culture is created each day, each moment. And luckily I inherited this great school also. The previous principal, Dr. Justin Oxley, became my boss. He's at central office now as executive director. And so he left me a good ship. The ship wasn't bare. The ship was going in the right direction. So I inherited something that was an excellent, school. And so the way I enhance that is, you hire strategically. And, I was able to hire all 5 of my assistant principals, and, each one of them has unique strengths, and I was able to pick them based on the strengths. And one of the things that I really like and value is people that live in my community. I shared a little bit that my children went to school there. 3 of my assistant principals either currently live in the community or had children that attended our school, Churchill. And I think when you do that, you work just a little bit harder because that's your children's school. Those are your neighbors. Those are your friends. And so I think that's a unique dynamic to our campus. I also wanted to make sure that the shout out to Ginger McDaniel, a teacher on my campus who coined a phrase, long-timers. Those are people that have been on my campus, teachers that were there longer than the kids have been alive that were on the campus. So you're looking at 14 years plus, and really embracing that knowledge and really walking alongside of them and listening to them and tapping into their corporate knowledge for what you have and really embracing them. And then hiring really well for rising teachers coming to the campus. And, really working with those first-year teachers on the campus to be able to make sure they had a good structure, onboarding, and foundation to where they felt a part of the culture. Jeff, you talked a little bit about a large high school, 225 adults on the campus. There are adults in different departments that, have no idea who in the math department. They have no idea the science department. They only know their people. And so how do you bring them on? How do you make them feel at home? Because every campus, every leader you talk to says, we build a family culture on our campus. Well, if you don't know who's down the hall from you, that's not a family culture. And I, as the principal, have to model that. And so honestly, the See the People mantra, I tried to visit every teacher's classroom every single day. And I failed at that every day, but that was my goal. And that got me out of the office and got me into different buildings. Like Churchill High School had 9 buildings and about 35 acres, a very open campus. And if you played in the office all day long, you may not make it to certain parts of a building, but like once a month. And then imagine if that teacher was off that period. teachers may never see the principal. And so honestly, how does that culture, get built? Like it starts with the principal. Like honestly, you have to model what you expect. And then you have to, inspect, what you have to make sure that you are holding yourself accountable and your team accountable to what you expect of your staff. I always look for reasons to say yes. Jeff, if you came to me and said, hey, my kid is getting an award, they're in fourth grade, I want to be there. Well, that was my job, not for you to take a sick day or a half day, but my day to get you some coverage to get down there because that's what we do for family. Jeff, if you had a loved one that was sick or hurt or God forbid passed away, we need to do what we need to do to take care of you and your family. And that's what we tried to be able to do. I sent a Monday morning email, 7:30 every Monday. I delayed delivery and hit the inbox every Monday morning at 7:30. And honestly, the first two paragraphs talked about what I did with my wife and kids over the weekend. And that was my way of telling them, like, family is important and you need to do this. And it evolved into places that I went to eat. And I would say something like, man, I had the best hamburger and it was here. And if you've got a good burger, let me know. And people started sharing like that. And so like organically, like you connected with people that you might not connect with over things you might not have ever thought before. We lost a cat over COVID, and a morbidly obese cat, named Meatball. And Meatball, passed away. And I shared that journey in my Monday email. And a teacher reached out with a homemade cat recipe to try to save Meatball. And I had struggled to connect with this teacher, just for no other reason but myself. And, that was our bond. And so now we talk, pets and cats all the time because of those small things. And so you have to model family. You have to stress the importance of it, but you also have to be visible and you also have to be the biggest champion of your school. And so in that Monday morning, I made it a point to shout out and to celebrate, not just the score of the football game, but that cool lab that we went into in science, that activity I saw in social studies, that the academic UIL, the speech and debate, the band, all of those things that were extremely important to what you had. And then I was visible. Kids could come up to me and ask me anything. And I made it a point to talk to kids and get to know kids. And I wanted every kid on my campus of 23 or 2,400 kids to think I knew their name. I didn't know every kid's name because that's next to impossible. But I wanted them to think, Jeff, if you walk off campus, I know who you are. And you know what? I've lived in the community 25 years. I probably know your mother or father because I've dealt with your family before. I might even text them right now to call them if you left. And so that just living in the community, embracing who I was, being Mr. Churchill at times because I had a chip on my shoulder about my campus. I was an advocate for it. I was visible. I walked alongside teachers. I supported teachers. I also supported kids to the point where, we were family, and to the point where, kids, kind of just referred to me as, hey, Bloomer. And it was cool because I had like this relationship with them. And then last thing, I'll just tell you, I wore a pair of Adidas every day to school. Like big campus, and it was just hard to be around. And outside, it's South Texas, it's hot all the time. And kids constantly commented on my shoe game. And so those were type of things that just built this like weird culture that you can't quantify, that all of a sudden kids started commenting on my fit. And I had to look up Urban Dictionary, forgot what fit was because I didn't understand. But, those are type things. And then honestly, you say stuff like, hey, Jeff, what music are you listening to? What Netflix shows are you watching? And then you build this relationship with kids so that the next time, Jeff, you're having a bad day, I got to relate. Hey, Bloomer. Hey, it's Bloomer, Jeff. Let's go take a walk and talk. Because you know what? You told me that your favorite group was, Morgan Wallen. And let's talk Morgan Wallen songs as we walk down there. And it's just building that. And I think like it's hard because like you can't read about this in books. You just have to do this and you have to model it. And then pretty soon teachers are wearing, Adidas or Hoka's to school, and teachers are starting to ask kids about, interaction, and teachers are showing up to events. And all of a sudden that culture is there. And then when you have that relationship, the most important thing that we do is we teach kids. But you can't teach an 18-year-old, this, if they don't think you care, or if they don't know you, or if they don't understand the relevancy of it. And so building that rapport and that relationship with kids, modeled to teachers, allows our schools to be able to trend in the right direction academically, extracurricular, co-curricular, and just, all of those type of things.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, amazing educational leaders. If you're finding value in this podcast, learning new insights, getting inspired, or just nodding along thinking, yep, I needed that, then why keep it to yourself? Share this podcast with a colleague, a fellow school leader, or a teacher that is inspiring into leadership. Send them a link, post about it, or just casually drop, hey, you need this in your life the next time you see them. Let's grow this community of game-changing educators together, because great leadership isn't a solo act, it's a movement. Now, back to the show. Wow, you hit on a lot of great things there. A lot of things to unpack there, Todd. Thank you for sharing that. We're kind of winding down here.
Sure.
On the show. And so I want to kind of get into your book, The Blueprint.
Let's go.
The blueprint book that you have to survive and thrive as a school administrator. What inspired that book, and what will people take away from that?
Great. My brother Sean is an assistant principal, north of San Antonio, and it started as an email to him. Honestly, big brother support. Hey Sean, do these 4 or 5 things. Pretty soon it was a little bigger than an email, became a Google Doc, and pretty soon I thought I had something to share. And so, hard. I'm also a high school principal, so when the heck do I have time to do this? And so, it became a project over about 5 years. And at some point, it was like, I've never given birth, but I felt like I just had to get this thing off my chest. I had to birth it, right? And so, I was going to self-publish, and the Amazon self-publish route was great. And I felt like I had this insight and these wisdom, the structure, these systems, this relevant information, the story of my journey, successes and failures, advice from people around the nation to share. And I pitched it to everybody, and I got rejected by a whole bunch of people. And that's cool. They're lost. That was, the way I look at it. As the great Mel Robbins said, let them, now I'm going to let me go find a way to be able to, to get this. And so our friend Darren Peppard, who, Road to Awesome, came in, published my book, and it came out in August of 2024, and received some really good praise. It's relevant, it's practical. And honestly, as we're, getting ready to, a lot of us have already started our summer, just ending up schools on the East Coast. It's the perfect book to read at the pool or the beach. It's easy read. It gives advice and structures and systems. It'll make you laugh. It's good for aspiring principals. It's also good for veteran principals because it's great reminders as to you're not alone. It's great reminders that all of us have failed, and there's a way out of the failure. And so, right now, the book is, I'm really trying hard by creating some Instagram reels to highlight and promote the book because I do think it's got a practical value to people. And I do think if you pick it up and you read it, you'd walk away with that. Now, last thing before I leave, if you only got time to read one chapter of the book, I would read chapter 6. Chapter 6 has 10 actionable items that I would do differently if I could do it over again as a principal, because the job is difficult. It's a grind. And these are 10 things that I would do differently to extend the longevity. Like I said, I still have gas in the tank, but there are friends out there that are reaching out, and I refer them back to chapter 10. Just pick one of these. One of these I think would be insightful to be able to help you survive and thrive as a school administrator. So thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, I know I see you on IG all the time, and you're putting out some great stuff. There's some great content there. So I would recommend people to give Todd a follow, and all the information that he's getting out there has been really great. So Todd, we got, a little bit of time here. And so let's talk about just like what's next for you. And then the last thing I want you to end on is, what advice would you give to aspiring principals or people that are in the role? What would you say for advice for them to have to end off the show today?
Yeah, great. Thank you for asking that. I'm excited. In July, I start as the director of school leadership for the Archdiocese of San Antonio. I'll be working with Catholic school principals, and I'm excited to be able to walk alongside principals in a role of coaching and support and in that capacity. It's a brand new position, so I'm excited also because it's was just created. And so we'll be able to define that kind of as we go. And selfishly, I'm hoping that some of the systems and structures from the blueprint we'll be able to I'll be able to put into practice for them. But honestly, I'm looking forward to getting to know these leaders. It's a different realm for me. While I am a Catholic and I was an altar boy growing up, I was a public school kid the whole way and worked in public school. And so being able to tap into, starting all meetings in prayer, and working with people that are walking in faith also along with academic and extracurricular stuff. It's really exciting to me. And so I'm excited about that. That'll start up in the next month. What is next? I'm working on the Blueprint Part 2. And the Blueprint Part 2 is meant to be a companion to my first book. And it is a month-by-month guide for what principals should focus on. And so one of the things that people reached out to me after reading the blueprint was, hey, I need a little more structure, like October. Like, what the heck, man? Nobody warned me about Shocktober. Like, how do I handle this? And nobody warned me about, what I should be doing in July to prepare for August, or how I should prepare in May for coming back to school. And while lots of districts have great checklists, checklists are kind of stagnant. You just kind of look at them and you kind of forget about them. So this is interactive. It's got a inspiration to begin with. It's got a scripture to begin with. It's got topics to talk about at monthly faculty meetings. It's got checklists, but it's also like I expand on a lot of things and I share things that help me get through those months. And then each month I have a different principal that writes about that month and how they kind of get through that. So I'm excited about that. I'm pushing hard to get it to market, but I'm not sure it's going to get to market before the start of the school year. And so maybe a soft launch in the fall and then coming back hard in the spring. I'm not sure about that. How do we end this? I end this with advice to what I would give to you, Jeff, for myself, if we could rewind time. And here's what I would say: make sure that your spouse and your children understand the demands of the job. Make sure that your spouse, shout out Sharon. Hopefully you're still listening to me, babe. Love you. She took a back seat to my career, and that's unfair. And I'm lucky she stayed with me. Beautiful woman inside and out. And she helped raise our kids while I was off raising other people's kids. And so, it makes you emotional when you think about that, because, time passes and you can't rewind time. And so I would make sure that your spouse understands that this job, and here's what it could do to a family or with time. Jeff, you're a high school principal. If something happens in the evening, they're calling you. And you may say, after 6 o'clock or after 7 o'clock, it's family time. Yeah, you got an emergency at school. They're calling the principal. They're not calling the science teacher and stuff. And so, your spouse has to understand that. And there's been many nights that family events have been ruined because of something happening on our campus. Now, we all get better at that as we move along the profession, but I didn't do a good job of talking to my wife early on to say, hey, babe, my whole career is going to dictate where we go on vacation, what we do, what Saturday looks like, what Sunday looks like, what Wednesday looks like. And then honestly, I would say to any principal that has children, never miss an event that they have. Now, we got to go to graduation. We got to go to big district meetings. That is what it is. But if your child, shout out to my son, Andrew, he got the role in 3rd or 4th grade as a weed. Him and a couple of his buddies were weeds in a school play. No lie, weed number 1, 2, and 3. And Andrew Bloomer was a weed. And I went to it. And he had no lines. He just stood there. And it's still a family memory that we have to this day. And I think about, I could have said, oh, he's just a weed. I'll get him next time. And so, being able to kind of go and do that. So I would say, Jeff, that's my advice. Make sure your spouse knows and your kids know.
All right, awesome. Now, if you guys want to get connected with Todd Bloomer, I'm going to put all this information down in the show notes. Todd, it was great to have you on the show today. Thank you for being a part of the Educational Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for what you do, Jeff, and thank you for being patient with me. It's a long time coming. We connected.
What an episode with Todd Bloomer. His journey in education is inspiring and gets you thinking about how you can lead your school more effectively. His honesty, experience, and wisdom are exactly what school leaders need to hear. I hope this episode resonated with you today, and if it did, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to follow Todd on his social medias and grab a copy of his book, The Blueprint. Links will be in the show notes for you. And until next time, be 1% better. Thank you for sticking around to the very end of this episode. I hope this podcast brings value to you as an educational leader. I would invite you to share this podcast with other educational leaders, or maybe that inspiring teacher who would like to be an educational leader someday. I would also invite you to subscribe and to follow this podcast so you can get the most recent updated episodes when they drop. I would also love it if you leave a review and rate this podcast 5 stars, because that would make this podcast more discoverable to other educators like yourself. You can also follow me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, and Substack. All you need to do is look for Principal Jo, and boom, there I am. This is where we can continue the conversations from the episodes that you have enjoyed. I am so thankful for you guys for listening. Until next time, always be 1% better.